A single drop of bat urine can save all of humanity. Can you believe it? Just because a single drop of bat urine fell on this statue. The statue instantly cracked open, revealing a human eyeball. Right after that, cracks started appearing on the stone blocks on its back. The only surviving man on Earth broke free from the stone. The man's name is Dashu. He had been sealed away for 3,700 years. Now, he is the only surviving human on Earth. It turns out that 3,700 years ago, Earth experienced an unprecedented catastrophe. The unlucky Dashu was just about to confess his love to the goddess he had secretly admired for 5 years. But before he could say a word, a golden light suddenly appeared in the sky, illuminating the earth. Everyone was mesmerized by this phenomenon. Sensing something was wrong, Dashu immediately told the goddess to hold onto the little locust tree. He stood in front to shield them. But the moment they came into contact with the golden light, all humans were instantly petrified. This disaster swept across the entire Earth. Not a single human was spared. Airplanes lost control and crashed into the ground. The exploding debris consisted of petrified human limbs. Only a few animals managed to escape this human-targeted catastrophe. But humanity did not die. Instead, they remained conscious, trapped inside stone statues. Without human activity, the Earth returned to a state of tranquility. Human-made structures began to show signs of life. Nature continuously washed away humanity's traces. Once grand skyscrapers gradually collapsed. In their place, vibrant, thriving forests took over. Dashu endured through 3,700 years, by holding onto his belief in confessing to his goddess. A single drop of bat urine miraculously freed Dashu from petrification. He stepped out of the cave. Outside, he saw petrified humans everywhere. After thousands of years of wind and rain erosion, many stone statues had crumbled into fragments. He made himself a grass skirt. Then, following the map in his mind, he began searching. At last, he found the little locust tree from 3,700 years ago. And he finally saw the goddess he had admired for thousands of years. His love confession, spanning millennia, had finally come to an end. I like you. For thousands of years, I have liked you. At this emotional moment, he wanted to offer his first kiss. But he was shocked to see a line of words engraved on the locust tree. Come downstream, big guy. It turned out that Dashu was not the first human to revive. His friend Senku had already revived several months earlier. This made Dashu ecstatic. Senku immediately told Dashu that the current date was October 5, 5738 AD. They had been sealed away for 3,700 years. Dashu was curious how Senku knew the exact date. It turned out that during those 3,700 years, Senku had used sheer willpower to keep track of every second. However, he noticed that every time he counted to 800,000 seconds, he risked losing consciousness, so he kept counting while simultaneously thinking about how to save humanity. Thus, when he broke free, he immediately acted according to his pre-sealing plans. In just 6 months, he advanced from the primitive era to the Stone Age. But in the primitive era, intelligence alone wasn't enough. Senku was constantly busy just trying to survive, let alone executing his grand plan to revive humanity. However, after Dashu, strong but simple-minded, joined him, everything became much easier. Senku wanted to unravel the mystery of human petrification and restore civilization. Dashu, on the other hand, only wanted to revive his goddess. Together, they decided to rebuild civilization from scratch using science. They would become the new Adam and Eve of this era. Dashu was indeed a great worker. In no time, he gathered a full basket of poisonous mushrooms. Fortunately, biology expert Senku could identify which ones were edible. Otherwise, Dashu would have been in serious trouble. After eating and drinking their fill, Dashu set off again to find more food. He came across a tree full of grapes. Having not eaten grapes in over 3,000 years, he was determined to taste them. His expression alone showed how delicious they were. On his way back, Dashu passed by the cave where he had awakened. To his surprise, he saw that the bat urine dripping from the cave ceiling had been collected in a container. This completely confused Dashu. Could there be other surviving humans? Suddenly, Senku appeared behind him. Of course, this was Senku's doing. In his quest to study human petrification, bat urine was his only clue. After all, both of them had been revived by bat urine. In fact, bat urine contains a large amount of nitric acid. It has corrosive properties. After Senku revived, he began experimenting with petrified swallows. But countless experiments ended in failure. Senku suspected that the nitric acid's corrosiveness was too weak. If he could add alcohol to the nitric acid, it would create a stronger industrial-grade corrosive agent. Dashu didn't understand a word of it, but he was extremely excited, because the grapes he had just picked were the perfect ingredient for making wine. Without hesitation, they got to work. Dashu collected all the grapes from the vine. Then, using feet that hadn't been washed in 3,000 years, he stomped on them. Finally, they stirred the extracted liquid daily. After 3 weeks, they had successfully brewed grape wine. The next step was the most difficult and tedious: distilling the alcohol from the wine. However, their crude pottery vessels could not withstand high temperatures, so they decided to wait until winter to distill it, as the extreme cold would help prevent the containers from breaking. After a full year of experiments, they finally obtained high-concentration alcohol by the following spring. Senku took out a petrified swallow. He poured the industrial-grade corrosive agent onto it. Now, it was time to witness a miracle. After 3,000 years, the swallow spread its wings once more. Excitement filled their eyes, impossible to contain. At that moment, a new era for humanity was about to begin. I will use science to defeat this supernatural curse. This was truly exhilarating, but who should be the first human to be revived? Senku gave Dashu the right to decide. As expected, Dashu chose his goddess. But could they really bring a human back to life? Just as Senku was about to pour the revival formula, Dashu suddenly realized that he had revived without clothes. If they revived the goddess now, wouldn't Senku get an unfair advantage? The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. He immediately lunged to cover Senku's eyes. He insisted on carrying the goddess back to camp, and preparing clothes before reviving her. Senku was completely speechless at Dashu's thought process. But just then, a lion's roar came from behind. Charging straight toward them was a powerful male lion. Terrified, the two turned and ran for their lives. But how could there be lions in Japan? It turned out that during the 3,700 years of petrification, without human intervention, the lions in zoos had eaten all the other animals. Then they roamed the streets, feasting on pets. Humans were no longer at the top of the food chain. Without hesitation, the two of them chose to jump off a cliff to escape. After all, in the primitive era, falls weren't fatal. But the lions still didn't give up. Instead, they got even closer. With determination, Dashu tossed the goddess into Senku's arms. He prepared to hold off the lion pack himself, because he believed that to save humanity, they needed Senku's brilliant scientific mind. Senku immediately objected. In the primitive era, brains alone weren't enough. They also needed Dashu's incredible strength. Neither of them could be left behind. Dashu thought for a moment. Then he led Senku to a massive tree. He remembered that he once discovered the strongest primate high schooler, Chishiu Tsukasa, a man who had once taken down 3 wild bulls with his bare hands. Now, he was their only hope. Dashu placed the goddess statue aside. She would have to wait a little longer. As Senku poured the revival fluid onto the statue, the lions completely surrounded them. At the critical moment, the stone shell cracked rapidly. The strongest man on earth slowly opened his eyes. The sheer force of the shattered stone fragments sent the lions flying. An enraged lion lunged forward again, but with one simple, effortless punch, the entire pride fled in terror. While Dashu was celebrating gaining a new ally, Senku had a growing concern. In an era without firearms, physical strength was the most unpredictable factor. Tsukasa held a deep reverence for nature. To honor the fallen lion, he decided to turn its pelt into a cloak. After that, they brought Tsukasa back to camp. Tsukasa assured them that as long as he was around, they would never have to worry about food again. Whether it was chasing wild boars on the plains, catching geese barehanded, or fishing in the ocean, Tsukasa, the Lion King, displayed absolute dominance. At last, they had secured unlimited access to meat. The plan to revive human civilization had officially begun. The first step was to find the most essential material, calcium carbonate. It was the same common limestone found 3,700 years ago. The process of making calcium carbonate was quite simple. All they had to do was grind shells into powder. This would extract the calcium carbonate within, a task that required no thinking. Dashu could handle it alone. Calcium carbonate had 4 key uses. The first was agricultural fertilizer. The second was cement for construction. The third was soap production. In this era without medicine, soap, which could kill bacteria, was a lifesaver. However, Senku didn't reveal the fourth use. That night, Dashu's loud snoring kept Tsukasa awake. It seemed he was planning something. Meanwhile, Senku was nowhere in sight. He was outside, secretly crafting a mysterious tool. The next day, Tsukasa confided in Senku for the first time. He revealed his painful past of being mistreated by the rich and powerful. He believed that elderly people and children were burdens to humanity's progress. There was no need to revive them. You understand, don't you? Tsukasa, you just personally killed a human. His vision was to create a new world only for the young. A world free from oppression and exploitation. He hoped for Senku's support. But Senku outright rejected his idea. I will use the power of science to save every last human being. His vision was to use science to save all of humanity. This sent a chill down Senku's spine. Luckily, they had not told Tsukasa about the nitric acid cave. As long as he didn't know the revival formula, Tsukasa couldn't act against them. This silent battle of wits was something simple-minded Dashu couldn't comprehend. All he cared about was reviving his beloved goddess. This is amazing. The miracle water from the cave is finally ready. Now I can finally revive my goddess. Realizing they could no longer keep it a secret, Senku decided to openly demonstrate the revival process. However, he claimed that the miracle water had run out, so he instructed Dashu to return to the bat cave to collect more. With the raw materials for the revival fluid right before them, Tsukasa was not going to miss this opportunity. He claimed he was faster than Dashu. After getting the location, he immediately set off for the bat cave. But this was exactly Senku's plan. They had to revive Kohaku before Tsukasa returned. Now that the bat cave had been exposed, if Tsukasa learned the formula for the revival fluid, he would surely eliminate them. Tsukasa, the Lion King, was a good man, but also a murderer. Dashu was confused, but he knew that following Senku's lead was the right choice. So they split the tasks. They quickly prepared the revival fluid. The moment the fluid was poured, the stone statue cracked rapidly. Countless memories of his goddess flooded Dashu's mind. Kohaku, can you hear me? Kohaku. Dashu. Before they could even reunite properly, Tsukasa suddenly returned. He immediately realized he had been deceived. To protect his goddess, Dashu boldly decided to take on the strongest man alive. The moment he charged at Tsukasa, he underestimated the man who could kill lions with his bare hands. Senku realized Dashu was being reckless, but he had already prepared for this confrontation. He quickly grabbed a crossbow and fired at Tsukasa. With sheer brute strength, Dashu managed to deflect Tsukasa's attack. This stunned Tsukasa, because until now, no one had ever blocked his strike before. And just moments ago, Dashu had the chance to attack him. But he didn't take it. Instead, simple-minded Dashu responded, I don't want to hurt anyone. You can beat me up if you want, but please don't destroy the statues of the elderly and children. Before he could finish speaking, Dashu ultimately couldn't withstand Tsukasa's kick. Seeing that they were no longer a threat, Tsukasa warned them not to interfere with him. Then he left to continue destroying statues. Watching the crossbow bolt flying at 200 km per hour, and Tsukasa effortlessly dodging it, Senku realized that ordinary weapons were useless against him. They had to develop a more advanced weapon. Before Tsukasa figured everything out, so they used a diversion tactic. They deliberately left footprints to mislead Tsukasa. Then they fled in the opposite direction. Their destination was the volcanic crater near Mount Fuji. There, they could find the raw materials for scientific weapons. But after 3,700 years of geological shifts, Mount Fuji's coordinates had changed. Even using a homemade sextant, it was difficult to pinpoint its exact location. At that moment, Kohaku discovered an open area with no vegetation. Standing there was an intact Great Buddha statue. It was none other than Japan's largest Buddha statue, the Great Buddha of Kamakura. This confirmed that their sextant calculations were correct. They continued on their journey. Through mountains and rivers, through storms and harsh conditions, they finally reached the base of Mount Fuji. Everyone knows that Japan's natural features are well known. Earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes. So in volcanic hot springs, one can easily find an abundance of sulfur. And sulfur was a crucial ingredient for making gunpowder. Meanwhile, on the other side, Tsukasa knew that Senku would never simply run away. He was definitely gathering materials to make a weapon against him. Using keen observation, Tsukasa instantly saw through Senku's plan. He immediately set off in pursuit of Senku's group. He had to stop them before they could make gunpowder. Would Senku and the others succeed in creating a scientific weapon to counter him? Their answer was guns. A gun. To defeat the strongest creature on Earth, Senku decided to create this revolutionary scientific weapon. After countless hardships, they finally gathered all the ingredients for gunpowder. The manufacturing process was surprisingly simple. First, they added sulfur, which was free. Then they added charcoal, also free. Finally, they added potassium nitrate. Once all the ingredients were mixed, they added a pinch of sugar for enhancement. And lastly, by pounding the mixture 49 times with a wooden mallet. they would create a powerful explosive. The moment Dashu heard there was physical labor involved, he immediately grabbed a giant rock and rushed over. This scared Kohaku half to death. If the rock created even a tiny spark with the gunpowder, they would all be blown to pieces. But Senku reassured them that an ordinary rock wouldn't ignite a fire. However, after analyzing the situation, hot springs, pyrite, wait, Dashu was holding a piece of pyrite in his hands. The explosion's power was undeniable. Senku immediately became excited. This stuff could definitely be used as a deadly weapon. The kind-hearted Kohaku feared that Senku would use it against Tsukasa. But Senku assured her that violence wasn't the only option. He planned to use the gunpowder to negotiate with Tsukasa. But if the talks failed, then they would have no choice but to use it. Meanwhile, Tsukasa had already spotted the explosion's smoke. He rushed toward their location. Now, he was certain Senku had successfully made gunpowder. Both sides now had murderous intent. Just as Senku and the others were putting out the fire, something shocking happened. In a world where humanity had perished, smoke signals rose in the distance. Could someone else have revived before them? It was clear this wasn't Tsukasa's doing. If the smoke signals were a response to their explosion, they needed to reply. Senku made a decision. He would increase the fire. They would send a smoke signal, but doing so would also expose their exact location to Tsukasa. On the other side, Tsukasa was now certain Senku intended to use gunpowder against him. To counter Senku's new weapon, Tsukasa unleashed his strongest move yet. He took Kohaku hostage to threaten Senku. Tsukasa believed that if scientific weapons were created, they would eventually lead to the revival of the old world. And with that, greed and war would return. The world would once again be tainted by war. To stop the mad scientist Senku, Tsukasa resorted to brute force. He continued to threaten Senku. Tsukasa demanded that Senku hand over the revival formula. With it, he could revive more people and build his own kingdom of strength. Although Senku was worried about Kohaku's safety, he maintained a calm and indifferent expression. But in the next second, Tsukasa suddenly sliced Kohaku's hair in half. Senku immediately lost his composure. He had no choice but to give in and reveal the formula. However, Kohaku suddenly grabbed a knife and held it to her own throat. She declared that her life didn't matter. But Senku must never reveal the secret. This deeply affected Senku. He couldn't bear to see such a kind-hearted woman suffer anymore. So he gave Tsukasa the complete formula. Tsukasa continued his threats. If Senku agreed to stop advancing civilization, he would spare his life. This made Senku recall his past. Since childhood, he had been passionate about science. His father, wanting to support his dream, even sold their house. Also that Senku could have enough scientific equipment. Through continuous innovation, he even built Japan's first homemade spacecraft. At that moment, the three of them launched their miniature statues into space. Even though the ship exploded, their statues remained forever in the vast universe. And so, when faced with the choice between science and death,